Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And every now and then, a genuinely great movie comes out that just doesn't perform very well. And at the same time, other movies come out that aren't nearly as good, yet they still make millions at the box office. Now I know the criteria for greatness is subjective for any piece of media, but with respect to movies, most agree. Not every movie earns a box office return that's proportional to its quality. But when a genuinely great movie underperforms, even when it has so much going for it, that feels a lot more tragic. Now the reasons for that underperformance vary, but those circumstances tend to get obscured over time. Hollywood is and always has been a ruthless business. Anything that underperforms is unlikely to get future support. And of all the movies that deserved far better than it earned at the box office, Transformers 1 is a special case. Now, this movie had a lot working against it long before the first trailer dropped. It was also ambitious in how it sought to reinvigorate the Transformers franchise, altering the format, focus, and setup from previous entries. I'll even admit, I was not that excited about this movie when it was first announced. I count myself among those who felt burned out by everything Michael Bay has done to this franchise. While I did enjoy Bumblebee, Transformers movies just didn't excite me as they once did. I didn't even end up seeing Transformers 1 until its second week in theaters. I also wasn't planning to see it, but having heard a lot of praise from some friends of mine, I gave it a chance. I still went in with low expectations, but I was genuinely surprised at how great this movie ended up being. Transformers 1 delivered in ways I didn't think was possible for the franchise at this point. It wasn't just great in terms of story, spectacle, and characters. It really got to the heart of what makes Transformers great, beyond the inherent appeal of alien transforming robots fighting. After seeing the movie, I made plans to see it again. I also hoped that it would do solid numbers at the box office, at least enough to warrant a sequel. But sadly, Transformers 1 ended up underperforming. Despite high ratings by Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, and CinemaScore, the movie only grossed about $130 million. And that didn't even match the high end of its production budget. So, as of the making of this video, it's unlikely that this movie will be getting a sequel. But rather than lament on where this leaves the franchise as a whole, I'd like to highlight and even celebrate everything that Transformers 1 does right. In terms of setup, the movie is framed as an origin story. This takes place before the war that destroyed Cybertron, before Autobots and Decepticons were even a thing. Optimus Prime isn't even Optimus Prime yet. He's Orion Pax, a lowly mining robot who can't even transform. And Megatron isn't Megatron either. He's D16, another mining robot who also happens to be Orion's best friend. With respect to the lore, this lines up perfectly with the larger history of Transformers. Going all the way back to the 80s cartoon, it's well established that Optimus and Megatron weren't always enemies. It has even been implied in previous movies that they were practically brothers at one point. While the substance of this history has played out in many ways, Transformers 1 really went the extra mile. It spends the first third of the movie establishing how close these two are. Orion and D16 aren't just casual friends. They always have each other's back. They're always there for one another, especially when one of them gets in trouble, which tends to happen a lot with Orion Pax. And if you didn't know anything about Transformers, you never would have guessed that these two would have become mortal enemies. That deep friendship is critical to establishing the emotional stakes. But Transformers 1 is just as ambitious with respect to the narrative stakes as well. In addition to being close friends, D16 and Orion Pax share in the struggles that come with being a mining bot on Cybertron. They understand how hard it is, being at the lowest rung of society. But they also acknowledge that they play a critical role in that society. They don't initially know all the details, but their planet is in a state of crisis. The primes that once oversaw Cybertron are gone. The energon that is the life source of every Cybertronian, it no longer flows freely. So while countless other Cybertronians mine what they can, the ruling elite, under the guidance of Sentinel Prime, seeks the missing matrix of leadership, which is the key to getting the energon flowing again. Now, that's the official story, but it's clearly an incomplete story. Orion Pax is just more determined than most to learn those missing details. That puts him at odds with many of Cybertron's authorities, but his intentions are not at all mischievous. He also wants to find the Matrix of Leadership. He wants to save Cybertron, just like Sentinel Prime. But for him, doing his part as an Energon miner just isn't enough. As for D16, he is very much an accomplice in that effort. He covers for Orion even when he upsets the authorities. But he's also a lot less eager to bend the rules. He wants to save Cybertron too. He also wants to find the Matrix of Leadership. But he's much more inclined to trust the plan that Sentinel Prime has laid out for them. He even respects and admires the Primes more than most. To him, Cybertron's past and future are closely tied to the Primes. This dynamic becomes the catalyst for some pretty heavy drama later on, and it only gets more tragic as the story unfolds. Thanks to a combination of bold recklessness and blind luck, Orion and D16 come across a distress message from Alpha Trion, one of the Primes thought to be dead. But at this point, they've broken so many rules and upset so many authorities, so if they're going to pursue this signal, they have to do it on their own. They're still able to enlist the help of B-127, who would one day become Bumblebee. They're also joined by Alita 1, who was actually demoted from her position in the mines thanks to Orion and D16. But their lower rank in the Cybertronian pecking order only gives them more incentive to succeed. If they can be the ones to rescue a Prime and find the Matrix of Leadership, then that wouldn't just get them out of trouble. Orion Pax and D16 would become the saviors of Cybertron. But everything changes when Alpha Trion reveals a disturbing and infuriating truth. Everything that went wrong with Cybertron, the deaths of the Primes, the loss of the Matrix, and the lack of free-flowing Energon, it's all due to one betrayal. Sentinel Prime, not just content with being a Prime, sought to rule Cybertron himself. So he betrays his fellow Primes, crafting an elaborate fiction about what happened, and made a deal with Cybertron's mortal enemies, the Quintessons. In terms of selfish, irredeemable acts, Sentinel Prime really raises the bar. He's more than happy to let every Cybertronian toil in mines, also he can exercise near absolute power. He'll even deny them their cogs, which allows them to transform. For a transformer, that's akin to cutting out a vital organ and holding it for ransom. For Orion and D16, this revelation is more than jarring. How they react and the recourse they ultimately pursue in light of this knowledge, it ends up sending them down very different paths. Whereas Orion wants to fix Cybertron and free his fellow bots, D16 wants revenge. He wants Sentinel Prime to suffer for his treason. To him, it's not just the crime that's egregious. D16 once respected and admired the Primes. They were shining examples of what a Cybertronian could be. Now, he finds out one of them committed the ultimate act of treason, dooming him and every other bot to a life of toil and ignorance. But as enraged as D16 is, he and Orion are still friends and allies. They're both on the same page in that they want to take down Sentinel Prime. They want to expose his crimes, heal Cybertron, and free their fellow bots from his oppressive system. Even B-127 and Alita are on board. But D16 is so blind with anger that he starts to lose sight of the bigger picture. It doesn't happen all at once, but by the time he, Orion, and the others take the fight to Sentinel Prime, it's easy to see that D16 is becoming Megatron. But more importantly, we can also appreciate why he's becoming Megatron. This, in my opinion, is what makes Transformers 1 stand out for all the right reasons. It gives depth and insight to one of the most iconic antagonists of this franchise. In so many other mediums, Megatron carries himself like a standard pure evil villain on par with Emperor Palpatine. He's all wrath, hate, anger, and vengeance. Yes, he does have an agenda, but it rarely extends beyond destroying the Autobots and rebuilding Cybertron in his image. Now, Transformers 1 doesn't radically alter that agenda in the grand scheme of things. but it adds greater complexity by revealing how it started. Megatron didn't just wake up one day and think he ought to rule Cybertron. He became who he became after learning a painful truth. Everything and everyone he held dear was a lie and a fraud. And that hurt on a level that is hard to quantify. For a time, he and Orion Pax shared the same ideals. They fought to them, clung to them, and even trusted them. But once those ideals were shattered, this created a divide that would ultimately make them mortal enemies. That divide eventually culminated with the defeat of Sentinel Prime. In this moment, it really felt like a point of no return. Orion Pax sees an opportunity for justice and reform. Like D16, he's angry. He does want Sentinel Prime to pay for his crimes. But following blind rage won't undo the damage he's done, or fix the corrupt system that he created. Orion fights hard to help his friend see that, so much so that he puts himself in the line of fire. But it's still not enough. That's really the ultimate tragedy of Transformers 1. It highlights just how close Orion Pax and D16 came to being Cybertron's saviors. They could have been the ones who brought down Sentinel Prime, exposed his lies, and rebuilt their world for the better. But D16 was never going to see beyond his anger. He was always going to become Megatron. And Orion Pax, ever the idealist, was always going to become Optimus Prime. By the time Transformers 1 ends, it's easy to see why these two are locked in this endless conflict. It's also easy to see the merits of that conflict. They both emerged in a system built on fraud, corruption, and exploitation. They both fought for a better future for their world. Even though that fight goes on to destroy their planet, it's always personal for them. It always has this element of intractable differences between Autobots and Decepticons. And these intractable differences began with Orion Pax and D16. Transformers 1 may have the action, aesthetic, and spectacle of a standard Transformers movie, but it also delivered a surprising level of depth. It managed to take a franchise built around transforming robots fighting one another and makes it feel dramatic. That's not something we expect to see in a movie like this, even if you're a Transformers fan. But despite this nuance, the fact still remains. This movie underperformed. It did not generate the kind of box office that will inspire Paramount or Hasbro to make more movies like it. That likely means that the future of Transformers movies aren't going to follow the same formula as Transformers 1. And that's disappointing, because a movie like this really does deserve better. Now, it's not entirely clear where this leaves Transformers with respect to future movies. But if history is any indication, this franchise will continue to adapt and transform as it always does. But if nothing else, Transformers 1 proves that this franchise can do more than just give us flashy robot fights. There is a larger story worth telling. A story that shows what happens when two close friends become divided in a horribly corrupt society. And that story is far more likely to resonate with any world dealing with similar corruption, including our own. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, take care and stay safe.